people along, to bring the American people along on fighting for climate action. Um, this is how we do it. Um, and this is all living in language, which is a part of culture. And it's grounded in facts, but to actually exact the vision that we want for the world, there has to be a shift um, in our language to get where people are right now so that they can understand. Um, yes. So it's about fighting, like this report says, that we need to make the messaging about fighting pollution, not about fighting climate change. Fighting pollution feels it people understand what that's about. Okay. Um, so I will make sure you guys have that full report too, and how that ties into our larger conversation about language and culture and how it's so critical in how we build a lasting movement. What also is fascinating about culture is this research about pollution and not pollution. You guys, Nick, Alex, Caitlin, Santino, Jimmy, you're going to be around in 50 years and you guys are going to have whole new words. There's going to be a whole new set of words to describe climate change. And there will be a whole new conversation about what words to use and what words not to use. And that's also what's cool about culture is it's always changing. Um, yeah, we talked about that. Culture lives upstream from facts. So like coming back to that original idea is the facts. I mean, they're important, but clearly their our awareness and their existence is not enough to create the change that we want in the world. How the story we tell ourselves about ourselves and the larger world and our relationship to it, which is everything in culture, is actually very powerful to use those facts to exact what we want in the world. So, a few things. This is just like general advice I have for writers. The best readers are the best writers. So, you want to improve your writing, read, consume, and consume all you can in the topic areas that you're interested in. Um, you'll get lots of ideas, lots to react to. Then just write. Like, I mean, I think that's also what's powerful about the story of writing and language often being the start of movements is because before Rachel Carson could become the leader of environmental movement, she didn't know everybody, she didn't know all the funders, she didn't know all the politicians. No, but she did have paper and a pen. And that's what you all have. You have paper and a pen. We can all start. That's why these movements often start in writing, because it is often so easy for us to just have access to it. Um, so write in a journal, speak text to voice in your phone, write on notes apps, block time off and dedicate yourself to writing. And just like with forming any other habit, like do something every day for 1 week and it'll stick as a habit. Um, that's actually what my dentist told me about wearing my mouth guard. And now I can't go to bed and I can't go to sleep at night without wearing my mouth guard because now my mouth just feels weird if I don't have my mouth guard in it. Right. So, like, if you build that habit so much, then that's where you want to be, where it feels weird that you didn't do it. Like, how did I not do that today? Because I'm so used to doing it. And that actually doesn't take very long. to establish. Setting the goal of doing it every day for 1 week. If you can do something every day for 1 week, you can do something every day for a month. If you can do something every day for a month, you can do something every day for a year. You can. Um, find the writing community. If because we often think of writing as like this isolating thing, but if you write, you're a writer. And I think one way I build my writing community is I ask to read other people's writing, then I ask for their thoughts and opinion about my writing. We exchange writing. Um, and that takes it's bold, I guess, to do that. I think there's plenty of reasons to be shy about doing something like that. And sometimes it doesn't feel comfortable, right? But um I would stress that there's not really a right way to do it, but but certainly some ways feel better than others. And so that's just really being in touch with like yourself and like what feels right. Meaning like someone may give feedback that doesn't feel right, and then maybe that's not someone that's in your writing community. Or maybe you aren't really loving the way that someone else writes. Maybe it doesn't mean that that person's doing it wrong or right. It's just maybe there's something there that's not like really speaking to you, and so you can just trust that feeling as more than just a, it's not really a judgment. So I try to be guided in this creative spirit, not in like what's right or wrong or what's better or worse, but being guided by um what um what I feel excited about. And then we can also, when people tell me like they want to be a writer, for instance, I often have a conversation about what your goals are, because my advice to you would be very different depending on what your goals are. Like I had a conversation yesterday with someone who said that he wanted to write a book, but at the end of the day, he really wanted to make a movie and get a screenplay. And that is a very different, methodical, strategic strategy that I would prescribe for someone who wanted to do that. Um, in their writing. There are things that that person would prioritize and wouldn't prioritize that I would not tell to other people who had different goals. If you wanted to write for kids, I would say that my advice would be different for you. If you wanted to write for adults, my advice would be different for you. Um, if you just want to publish something for your family and friends to read, my advice would be very different for you than if you told me you wanted to be a New York Times bestseller. Um, so they're understanding what your long-term goal is is also really important for um why you're writing the things that you're writing. And with that, I will leave it for any Q&A.
Thank you, Charles. Really love that. And I'm gonna start using unnatural uh weather events instead of natural causes and that sort of language. I know Ella, you had your hand up earlier if you'd like to ask
Oh
a
wait, I'm
question.
sorry, I didn't realize people were having questions throughout. Sorry about that.
Oh,
No,
good.
I just had a quick question. So we talked a lot about language and how it's really important. Do you think that like in this political climate and where we are in the US and in the world right now, it's possible to use language as a tool to kind of like revive and I guess like galvanize the climate movement to be as energetic and like action oriented as it was like before the pandemic and before Trump's presidencies and all of that.
Yeah, I do think so. I do think language really matters. I think that um right now, when it comes to creating change, it feels to me, this is my opinion, that the power really isn't in politics or lawmaking, it really feels like there's a huge opportunity for us to have a to build cultural power right now. And that's the whole message of this is cultural power starts with language. It gives framing and structure to cultural power. Why? Because um okay, I'm going to borrow a little bit from Sarah McBride, the United States representative, the first trans US representative. And she said something that was kind of controversial. She said, um, she was talking about politicians, like lawmakers like herself. She's like, it's actually not her job. It's not actually politicians' job to change public opinion. Their job is to reflect where their constituents are. If their constituents don't believe in climate change, then it is only reasonable that the way our American government is set up, that politicians would therefore not prioritize taking action on climate change. And the reality is that most Americans do not see climate change as an important issue in their lives. That is a fact. And so we should not be surprised that then politicians then deprioritize climate change. She used it in the context of trans rights. Being a trans woman herself, she's been posed this question before, and her thoughts are also in America, we are overwhelmingly not in support of trans liberation. That is where we are as a country right now. And that is quite frankly where most of the world is right now. Is most people in the world do not understand what the word binary is, what he, she, why they need to use different, why would any other pronouns other than he, she would exist. And that's the work. So, like, we can't keep asking politicians to save us, is what I'm trying to say. Because inherently, that's actually not their job. It's actually not their job to teach us these things, to teach us about climate change and to teach us about equality. That's the job of people who take up the mantle around creating a cultural movement and cultural revolution. And then we get really excited about the politicians that then represent those cultural beliefs that excite us. And that's where their power comes from, not the other way around. They didn't change how we think. We get excited about them because they reflect what we think. That's how our American government works. So we have work to do in the United States to get people excited about a vision that can then be represented by somebody that we are excited about. How do we do that? Well, using words like decarbonization, does it help or does it distract? Using words like extreme weather, does it help or does it distract? That's what we have to do the work of, is what is it that we're trying to create in the world, and then examining the language we're using to do that and evaluate, does it help or does it hurt us get there and getting there? Any other questions?
I have one. If no one else has one.
Yeah.
So I first wanted to say that starting a nonprofit at 12 is like super such a cool feat. I wanted to say that's loved hearing
Thank
that.
you.
But my question is, being involved with like environmental issues and like writing for so long, what do you think is the most positive change that has like occurred over the last decade regarding the environment?
The most positive change that has happened with respect to the environment. Um, I can fully appreciate that the market forces have compelled a lot of changes on its own without um, policy. So um, I got to speak on MSNBC during the second Obama administration, commenting on environmental justice um, as it related to what was then called the Clean Power Plan. The Clean Power Plan was, um, even though I supported this rulemaking by the EPA that the Obama administration introduced, I can also see that um, it was an expansion of EPA power to regulate fossil fuel um, power. So the Clean Air Act did allow the EPA to create standards on pollution, how much pollution could each generating facility create, power generating facility create. But essentially, what the Clean Power Plan did was make those rules so stringent that it would be impossible for coal power plants to exist. And the coal lobby sued the Obama administration and said that the Clean Air Act does not go as far to say that we can't have coal, and therefore your rule is basically in effect outlawing coal essentially, and and um, the Supreme Court agreed um, that the president could not create a rule that basically outlawed um, a entire industry for power generation, which makes sense to me, given our culture in America. Maybe a different culture, a different country's culture would have come to a different outcome, but our culture in America, that makes sense to me. Um, However, it didn't matter. It did not matter what the Supreme Court thought and what Obama thought, because what was true was coal became incredibly more and more expensive as time went on. And nobody, like, there was no one who wanted to invest in coal. And so now there aren't any new coal power plants that are being built, which is amazing. And um and so I'm really curious to see what's going to happen with this war with Iran, that this voluntary war that we chose to start with Iran, because people are going to learn very essential basic economics. The less you have of something, the more something costs. So when oil isn't getting out of the Strait of Hormuz, it's not leaving Iran, and it's being caught up there, and it's not being shipped to world markets. There's less oil available, so the price goes up. So is we're talking about fossil fuels. People do not know what we mean when we talk about fossil fuels as climate change activists. But what do they do know? They do know the price they pay every week when they have to fill up their car. They don't know that they're putting fossil fuels into their car, but they do know the price that that the gasoline costs. and um and that is going to shift culture. I really do think that's going to shift culture. And that is a cultural, this is a cultural lesson and moment that um, a lot of Americans have not experienced or had yet, because the last time something like this happened was in the 70s. So almost 50 years ago. So there are generations of Americans who haven't been forced to reckon with a oil crisis and how an oil crisis can is that connection of like, I'm putting dinosaur juice in my car, and in order to create more dinosaur juice, it's going to take thousands of years, and we're using it much faster than we are producing it. Like that lesson, that fact will solidify, I think, in people's brains if this continues to happen and go, if this war continues to happen. And then what will happen in 50 years? We might forget that lesson, and then it needs to happen again, right? Like I don't know, but like I just need to, I'm sharing you this as an example of like this moment can shift and change culture.
I think we have time for one or two more questions. I have a question, but I do want to leave space for the students. So if anybody has any final thoughts, please feel free to share them.
I kind of have another question. I don't know if I'm on the right track with this follow-up question, but it's kind of, you were talking about how like our culture with like the coal production, it didn't really align. Um so if I'm understanding that like US culture is about kind of like, well, it's like capitalism, always production, like consumption and stuff like that, and getting rid of coal was like contradictory to that common culture. Do you think that if we replaced coal with another energy source that could kind of like, I don't know if I'm phrasing this right, but if coal was replaced with another like renewable energy source to continue whatever culture, is that, do you think that that's possible, or is it just like coal is part of our culture? I
No,
don't.
it's the message we tell ourselves, right? So it's not about the coal as much. So the idea that a regulation could be so strict that it eliminates an entire industry is not, let's disconnect that from just coal, but just in general, like that statement, that does not sound like America. America does not, we do not have a history of legislating so strictly that we eliminate people's ability to make money. That sounds like other countries. For whatever ideas you have about that, like that's not really been part of our American culture. People come to America because governments in other countries took their businesses and told them that their biz and took over their businesses. Right? Like they came here for freedom to start, right? So that's how they see it. But then that word freedom, okay, people came here searching for freedom. Well, can is there a story that we can create that connects a renewable energy future to freedom? That's possible. That can be created in language. There's a possibility for us to see this if oil prices keep going up and people aren't able to pay their bills and get to work, go to their doctor's appointments, pay their medications, they might feel less free. And then there could be a conversation about like, is oil actually giving us freedom? It has to, we have to kind of come back to like, what is the cultural belief that we have about ourselves? Because I do think that that value of freedom and how people see it is can be a really strong cultural artifact. and maybe something that like climate change folks can lean into in order to build a broader base of support.
Any other questions? Okay, I'm gonna ask my question and then we'll have to wrap up after that because I have some reminders for the fellows. Um, so I want to preface my question by saying I fully am in support of using accessible language when talking about climate and making scientific information as easily digestible as possible. Um, and then I also wonder, it feels like there's this like self-perpetuating cycle of anti-intellectualism. Like scientists use scientific language and it makes people feel stupid, and so they're like science bad, and then scientists start using accessible language and then we don't necessarily have the full picture of what's happening because we're not using all of the language. So I'm curious, like, do you think it's a self-perpetuating cycle? Do you think this is contributing to anti-intellectualism, or like what are your thoughts on that?
um well, if people aren't even, if I hear what you're saying. And one, I do think that this message has to be tailored to who the audience is, right? Like if I'm
Mm-hmm.
talking to a bunch of climate folks, then I'm going to use all the words that I expect climate folks to know. But if I'm trying to build a campaign and shift perception for, let's say, a broad general election, which is like kind of how the outputs of this messaging could be used, then I might be really targeted in what kind of ads I create and what kind of guiding values I might put for my campaign. Um and when I'm looking at a political ad, I'm not like trying to, like, the primary reason is not to like learn the ins and outs of climate change. Like it's not to be intellectual. Like we don't look at ads to be intellectual. We look at ads to make us feel something that then can inspire some other action, right? And if we aren't using the language that gets people to feel anything, and then they're not doing anything about that, like the action could be, oh, may take a few steps to get there, but like maybe I want to be a climate change activist because that messaging made me feel something. And then that's where I get to be intellectual. But we're not even getting people there that far because we're already like not even like the first interactions that they're having, they're not even feeling anything. So we can't even get them to have an intellectual conversation.
Okay, thank you. I see Alex, you have your hand up. This will be our last question.
Yeah, it's kind of just clarifying what you were talking about. So from my understanding, it's basically like you would use this more broad language to kind of get people engaged in the initial conversation, and then once they get involved or like feel something to it, then you can kind of go more in depth.
Yeah, that's a good strategy.
Okay. Thank
Okay, well, thank you so much for your time this evening. I made sure that all the fellows have access to the PDFs that you shared, so they all have access to that. They're able to read through it. I encourage you all to look through them all in more detail. So yeah, thank you so much for all that you've shared today. I hope the fellows are taking something away and are potentially going to use some of these strategies to try and convince someone to join the good side. um, so yeah, let's everybody thank Charles for his time.
Sweet. Thank you guys. This is fun.
you.
Thank you. Take
Thank
care,
you so
everyone.
much.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Okay, and now we only have a few minutes left, so that was our last virtual session. We have one more thing next month, which is the Ecos Earth Day Fair, which is where you all will present your final projects. So make sure that your flyers are up to date because I'm gonna have to print them. I will print your flyers for you. And then we'll basically be tabling at the Ecos Earth Day Fair. And so the fair goes in from 11 to 4, but y'all do not have to stay the entire time. I'm going to say 11 to 1:30, 11 to 2 is like a good amount of time on April 26th. If you aren't able to make it, please reach out to me immediately, because that's also where we're going to be giving you your certificates and the books that you requested. So it's kind of doubling as our graduation. And then a lot of folks have been emailing me asking me about payment. I know that's what y'all are here for. No, I'm just kidding. I know you also care about these issues, but of course you want to get paid. So the program will process payment after the week after graduation. So graduation's on April 26th. The following week is when it will be processed. So I will be, for everybody that filled out the form and said that they want direct deposit, I will be emailing you the direct deposit form. So please fill that out by April 20th. If you said that you prefer check, we are going to confirm your address because we'll have to mail the check to you. We may be able, no, just kidding. We're gonna have to mail the check to you. Sorry. But so if you haven't filled out the preferred payment form, which I sent over a month ago at this point, you definitely should do that if you want to get paid. And yeah, if you are having any issues with your final project group or you need help with anything, please reach out to me. Any questions before I let y'all go?
Sorry, I have another quick question.
Yeah.
So are the presentations, are we like presenting at a table or is it like a whole, like how does that work?
Yeah, so we're gonna have a table and y'all will sort of be giving each group will be talking about the information on their flyers, which would be sort of a condensed version of your presentation. We're not gonna have access to like a projector and stuff. So as soon as you're done with your final project presentations, you can send them to me and I will look over them and I will be like, this is good and you did a good job. But what we really need for the actual Earth Day fair is the flyers. Um, so if y'all can finish those up and get them to me as soon as possible, please do. Does that answer your question? Okay. Anybody else have questions? All right, well, that was the final virtual session. I hope y'all enjoyed. There will be a survey at the end of the program. So at the beginning of the program, y'all all took a survey just so we could like test your knowledge basically and see we're comparing what you answered at the beginning to what you're answering now to see if you like actually learned from this. And then there's also going to be an opportunity for you to provide feedback for the program. So make sure you keep an eye out for that as well, because I will be sending that early next month to do the survey. So all right. And with that, hope y'all have a good night. And like I said, email me if you can't make graduation. Otherwise, bye.
Good night.